This is Talking Heads on Manx Radio. A fairly busy first half of the programme. We've still got some comments from that, which we'll get to in a little while. But you can't fail to have noticed that it's Manx Music Day. Of course, that doesn't mean that it's all about singers, songwriters and musicians. There are a huge number of people who work behind the scenes, quite literally, to bring performances and the arts to the public. Our guest live in the studio at the moment is Emma Callin, who's the head of Villa Gaiety Theatre and the Arts. Emma left the Arts Council last year and was in the role for 10 years. What made you decide to move, Emma? Because, you know, some people might suggest that it's a bit of a poisoned chalice running the villa.
Yeah, some people would. I mean, personally, I've been involved with the Gaiety Theatre, especially since I was very young, in amateur dramatics. So
well, you are frightfully theatrical, aren't you?
I try not to be. But yeah, I was 5 the first time I appeared on the Gaiety stage. I'd like to tell you it's all my mother's fault.
Yeah.
So I think lots of people who perform at the Gaiety have special fondness for the theatre. It really is a magical place to perform, and it's not just us locals who think that. I've seen that from many, many professionals who come over and are amazed by this beautiful, beautiful theatre.
Yeah.
So I've always loved working down there, and in my previous role as Arts Development Manager, of course, we worked with them a lot, Villa and Gaiety. Whenever the Arts Council bring over a big orchestra like the Halle, we work very closely with the Villa Marina around those projects, and so a lot of the people who work down at Villa Gaiety were already my colleagues, and it was the next step in my career. It's something that I've wanted to work in theatre for a long time. Before I moved home in 2001, I was working at the Hackney Empire Theatre, and I would dearly have loved to come home and go straight to the Gaiety, but there were no positions. I went into the civil service, which is where I still am in this role, and have really enjoyed working in the civil service, but I've been doubly fortunate to find jobs in the last 11 years that allow me to work in my passionate areas as well, in theatre and events management and engaging the public in the arts.
Well, I'm guessing, I mean, on the basis that for the last 10 years the government's been skint and has got no money ever for anything, that the arts is one of those areas that could very easily suffer. I mean, has it done? Because, you know, we can't afford Meals on Wheels, so can we afford exhibitions of, you know, budding artists?
No, we did see a big change after the financial crash in 2008. Now, of course, that wasn't the reaction to that on the Isle of Man in terms of arts funding wasn't quite as drastic as in the UK. So immediately in 2008 in the UK, we saw arts cuts like just across the country. Some local authorities in the UK lost 100% of their arts and culture budget. We're very fortunate that hasn't happened to us, but certainly in terms of Arts Council funding, they used to receive a revenue budget from the government, and they would receive funding from the tax taken on lottery ticket sales. In 2010 they lost the revenue budget, so they are wholly funded now on the tax collected on lottery ticket sales, and so that is entirely dependent on how many people buy a lottery ticket each month. So it's quite tricky to manage that. And certainly we've seen demand increase on that Arts Council funding. And definitely there's been cost cutting at Villa Gaiety. Me coming into the role now, there are a lot less staff than there used to be. And we're working much harder and successfully, I might add, in bringing commercial success into the venues. So yeah, we have been affected. I would say, looking across the water, we're in a fortunate position.
Doing reasonably well.
But what I would also say is necessity is the mother of invention, isn't it? And creative people are the best people to find ways to keep doing what they're doing. And value for money is normally always part of how the arts are delivered.
Well, I suppose the difficulty is that you've got a foot in both camps as well, because you say yourself that you're a civil servant, so you're there at the behest of the government, who are the ones who fund a lot of this stuff.
That's right.
Or have done historically. I mean, certainly they own the buildings, don't they, the properties?
Yes.
But, you know, you're a person, desperate, theatrical and all the rest of it, so, you know, your loyalties must lie with that side of the equation as well. Is it difficult to balance the two?
Yes, it can be difficult. I would add into that equation that I am also a taxpayer. I think sometimes people forget civil servants pay tax as well. And so, yes, I'd say the burden of public funding lies with me as a civil servant. We have to make sure that we're delivering everything the best and most efficient way that we can. And we are very conscious that there's no spare cash sloshing around. If we want to change something or improve it, then we're going to have to find really good ways of doing that.
Does this mean that we are going to be missing out on culture, though, because you're going for commerciality over things that might sort of enlighten people, bringing new experiences to people that they wouldn't normally enjoy?
Well, that's where the Arts Council works in partnership. So I would say there's two different ways there. So the Arts Council, their focus is on providing access. It's very important to them that engagement in arts and culture is open to as many people as possible. And so that means via a variety of things. And some of those things might be quite niche, or they might go into that funding commitment knowing it might be a small audience, but the important thing is the opportunity has been provided.
Well, you say a small, and that's the worry, and that's the perception from a lot of people who aren't in the arty establishment, and I'm one of those people, clearly, that you look at things like this and you think, there is a very small number of people on the island who gain a benefit from this and who follow all these things. And actually, it's not really of general interest to most people.
It might not be, but it's part of the cultural offering that we have, and we're very proud of that on the Isle of Man. And it's not always easy to provide a varied artistic and cultural offering when we're a small island. And because lots of those big things that come across that are on in the UK don't come here. Gary Barlow, good example this year, has come to the Isle of Man, but we don't often get those big named acts, and so for us then we have to pay for a plane ticket and a hotel fare.
We don't, and people say, the Villa's a great facility, why don't we get some headline acts? And I always say, well, because you probably couldn't afford them. We've got a population of 80,000 people, so you've got to take people, or you've got to book people who are going to fill the place at fairly expensive ticket prices to make it worthwhile. How does it work? I mean, a genuine question, how does it work? So somebody like Gary Barlow, or one of these comedians that you get over, the Topline comedians, do you have to pay them to come over and you keep the money, or is it a split of the gate fee sort of thing? Or
that very much depends on the agent,
right,
and what they expect. So there are negotiations to go through. It will depend on how big a name, whether the agent considers it a risk to come to the Isle of Man, whether we consider it a risk to book that person. So there are various ways we do that. Some people just come and hire the Royal Hall.
Yes.
It's all their risk. They take the ticket
money.
Income, that's that. Sometimes we'll enter into a deal with the agent. So it just all depends on who it is, when it is, of course, because we know the times of year that are going to work or might not work. So it's different according to who we're booking.
Well, yeah, and I'm not asking you to break any confidences, but, one of these top-line acts, and I'm not saying necessarily Gary Barlow, how much does it cost to get somebody like that, assuming that we've got to pay to get them over?
Well,
50,000, 100,000,
no,
20,000.
And I'm fairly new in post, so I'm only 4 months as head of Villa Gaiety Theatre and the Arts. So I can't really give you a definitive answer because it is very different. And also there'll be some acts that we're going after, that we want to get here, and there'll be reasons for that. And so we might be more flexible then. But I can't really give you a definitive answer.
Who makes the decision? Because there have been mistakes made in the past, haven't there? Was it the Jacksons that came over and lost a bundle of money because we paid them far too much? Yeah. So who comes up with the ideas? Or is it a case of, you'll get a newsletter from all the different agents to say, this is what we're doing with touring. Anybody that wants to book a slot, then get in touch.
Again, it's a mix. So we do get what we call cold callers. Yeah. People who've got a tour to offer would like to include the Isle of Man. We assess that. Is it something we were looking for? Do we think it'll fill an audience? There are others that we know will sell, that have either been here before or we've watched them sell out similar venues elsewhere that we'll go after. So that's very different. I mean, ultimately, the decision is down to the department. So we're part of the Department of Education, Sport and Culture.
Okay.
And I have a line of authority. Above me, there's my line manager and then the chief executive. So it is ultimately the department's decision. We assess the risk, look at the costs, look at what we think we'll get in terms of income, and judge it on that information.
We do have a very creative place, don't we, in the Isle of Man? I must admit, I mean, apart from Ireland, I can't think of anywhere that I've been where you can go into a load of pubs and places like that that, where there's live music playing. There is local music, lots of cover bands out, certainly around Douglas. And we also put on things. It strikes me that we sort of we're punching above our weight in some ways. Things like the Isle of Man Film Festival and things like that. What's the difference between the creative industries here, which government is supposedly supporting, and the arts, which maybe it's not so much?
So the creative industries is the side of the arts that directly benefits the economy. That's where we measure how people spend on tickets to see an event or a piece of art that they've bought, or some craft. Like I was just in the Welcome Centre on my way up here, and I was looking at some knitted Lockton sheets.
Is it open today?
It is open today.
Apparently it often doesn't open when we've got visitors. But...
Well, it was open today,
Okay.
and I had to queue, so it was busy. There you go. The creative industries is very much at the economic side. What do the arts bring in? And I guess for some people then that's the difference between I am a professional artist, or whatever type of artist that might be, or somebody who says, well, it's just my hobby, I just do it at weekends, I don't make any money from it. The creative industries is growing globally and is recognised as a really important economic sector. It's the only economic sector that has grown since the financial crisis, and certainly its value is not always tangible to measure. So for example, if you're a tourist in London, there are lots of museums and galleries, and there's the West End and all that, and that's probably part of the reason, if not the only reason, you decided to buy your ticket, go to London, stay in a hotel, go and spend all your money in those restaurants.
Agreed.
We all have that offering, and you're right, we have so much of it going on the Isle of Man. It's about making sure we develop that and look after it and invest in it so that we make the most out of the economic benefit at the other end. The arts is, I would look at it a two-pronged approach. So what the Arts Council fund is what we call grassroots funding. So they help make sure that some people get to the point where they do want to make it a business, and at that point they are then contributing to our economy via the creative industries.
Well, the creative industries have grown, like you say, since the recession, because that includes spin doctors, and we need spin doctors to tell us all that things are actually going swimmingly well when we've not got money to put food on the table. So that's why the creative industries are going well. Call me a cynic. A comment from Ian, one of our listeners. Stu, can you actually guess why the Villa Marina was allowed to be badly managed with regard to entertainment bookings for years? Nearly every gig up until recently lost money, says Ian.
I'd like to know where we got that information from.
Okay.
Certainly.
Well, I think there are famous examples of money being lost. I think the Jacksons was one of them, wasn't it? But
in the Tynwald budget this year for 18-19, it shows that Villa Marina and Gaiety Theatre are projected to cover their costs this year.
Cool.
So,
does that mean that you're dumbing down, that you're going for commercially popular things at the cost to more cultural things?
No, it has to be a real mix. We're publicly funded venues. We have to provide options for as many people as we can within our programming limits in terms of how many dates we've got available. We try to balance the mix. There are some things that are harder to bring over than others. So the orchestras that come over, I know some people would like to see that happen more often. It tends to be the Arts Council that supports that. We've built up a good relationship on the comedy circuit now, so we get lots of comedians over. Sarah Millican's on this Saturday doing 2 shows. And certainly on the music side, we've started to build that up. I would say that on the Gaiety Theatre side, because we're not on the touring circuit, it's our amazing amateurs that provide some of the biggest box offices. We've got Chitty Chitty Bang Bang coming in the summer, and that's one of the, people look forward, I think, to that summer season show now. I know the Manx Operatic Society are auditioning for Les Miserables this weekend because that will come next year. So we do try to get a mix and a balance, and I guess it all will depend on what's being offered to us as well. And some years there'll be lots of people out on tour that we know will sell in our venues, and then other years we'll have to look and dig a bit deeper and do some more exploratory work, but we do try to get a balance.
Cool.